Welcome to the final part of an audio program entitled Rebuilding America's Inner Cities, Newark's Renaissance. This program was produced by the Rutgers University Technical Assistance Program and is being sponsored by the Economic Development Administration's University Center Program. This program brings you the highlights of a roundtable discussion regarding Newark's economic renaissance. Participating in the discussion were Monsignor William Linder of New Community Corporation, Dr. Clement Price of Rutgers University, and Mr. Dale Caldwell of the Newark Alliance. Moderating the discussion was Makiba Jackson. We hope you find the information in this program rewarding and insightful.
From a business view, should Newark perform a professional return on investment projection for all new projects?
Well, of course, that's one of my favorite topics these days. I do believe that every project we ought to do a real study about its return on investment. What does it really bring to this city? We have an awful lot of rhetoric out there. This is good for the economic development of the city. How? What is the investment in dollars and what is the outcome of it and its impact on our city? I think we have to get down to reality. And one of the ways to do that is certainly to look at it as a return for investment.
Mr. Caldwell, what do you think of using ROI to determine the measure of success?
I think, again, on the public, private, and civic sector standpoint, I think that's been an issue across the country, that the civic sector, the public sector, and in some ways even the private sector have not set measurable goals to really determine how effective they have been in serving a community and generating revenue, et cetera, et cetera. Admittedly, it's very difficult to measure the impact of certain things. You take the arts, for example. I mean, it's clear that if you look at everywhere from New Brunswick to Newark, that the arts are a great way to bring people into a community and also to revitalize a community if done appropriately. Sometimes that's hard to measure. And I think, given the issues of a Crossroads Theater and other things, that there's been a gem of the state of New Jersey that is currently closed and hopefully is going to open again. I don't know that the state understands how important arts organizations are to the vitality of urban communities.
Well, I agree that the arts can't be measured, but unfortunately, often people who support the arts do present it as economic development. That isn't my pick. I would frankly like to see outdoor sculpture works. I'd like to see music. All of those things are very important to a city and the life of the city, but let's say that. Now we talk about economic development. What are we investing in? And what's our return? My position probably would be the best thing we could have ever invested money in is moving people from welfare to work. And I think if we begin to look at what the return from the investment in that, it would be significant. And yet, it's not on the table. It's the public sector is moving people off, but there's no investment in the people that are being moved from welfare to work. And that is tragic.
Moving to our next question, this is definitely a future-oriented question. It has some basis in the now as well. Talking about technology. How can technology be used to accelerate Newark's renaissance and the changes that are needed within Newark? I'll start that question with Mr. Caldwell.
I'm pleased to say that as one of the charter board members of a group called the Newark Technology Group, which a lot of people have not heard about, but there are these things called the technology breakfasts, which were at NJ and then the new restaurant Arthur's, where they're getting 200 to 300 people. And that has created a real community of not only folks who are experts in technology, but lawyers and real estate executives and people who have small businesses and others are coming together to really hear about technology. One of the wonderful things about Newark is because it was a little later in developing its technological infrastructure, it actually has jumped over places like New York and others. So it really has become a great hub for technology. And with IDT here now and a number of other small businesses, there's a group called AdReady, which a bunch of young folks who are NJIT alums that have an advertising internet company. There's some real excitement about that. Now, the trick is to really translate and communicate that to the schools to make sure that some of the technology entrepreneurship that is here, kids have exposure to that. Because as I mentioned to you before, I think technology is going to allow a leapfrog for communities that have been disenfranchised to try to catch up to some other communities. And you say, well, how can that potentially happen? Well, a couple things. One, I know in other urban school districts, and here there are internet and video conference centers where you can hear a professor from anywhere around the world. And so you're not limited to the four walls of a school in Newark. You can listen to professors and experts from Germany or France or et cetera. There's that real opportunity. There's an opportunity through email to try to enhance communication between potential role models and students. So those kinds of technology and the computers was a big part of it. So I think that communication between the various sectors is really critical, and technology allows us to do some things we couldn't have done 10 years ago.
Dr. Price, how do you see technology affecting Newark's future?
Well, Newark has not been a smokestack city in a long time. It may be that the new technologies, as Mr. Caldwell just indicated, will jumpstart the local and the regional economy. But let me look at something very, very elementary, and that is some of the things that I've seen in the Newark system, the school system, and that are kids who are computer literate and what it enables them to imagine. They're no longer bound by the provinciality of their neighborhood. They really have a keener interest in the world and news events and other cultures. So I think if we could agree that the smokestacks built the city and their decline hastened the decline of the city, maybe this technological transformation that is still kind of, I think, in its infancy stage, will enable Newark and its citizens to envision a different kind of town, a different kind of lifestyle, one that will be essentially more global than ever before.
Monsignor Linder, how can technology be used here in Newark?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is at New Community is bring technology into our neighborhoods, and our last project is 206 units of home ownership, which is really targeting people of very limited income, would never be able to have a home except with real deep subsidy. But one of the things we did is we created a smart village. It's totally wired. Some nice things come from it. In your home, you can get in, you can see in the daycare center and observe your child and what's going on in that room. You can tie into the University of Medicine and Dentistry. You can tie into the library. All kinds of resources are now in your apartment. Now, in addition to that, it gives us a chance, for example, in foster care, which is at a crisis point, we offered 40 homes to foster care providers who have been in the system with the state for 3 years or more. And we've subsidized. Some as much as they're getting a $120,000 home for $15,000. So you get an idea what their income levels are. But if we can, through internet really, there's no reason the state couldn't lessen their number of home visits by the social workers, but increase the information they get about the welfare of the child. Now, network into the daycare center, network into the schools that the children from that community go to, we can really create quite a system of foster care and create a support system to help strengthen those foster care homes. So there's some of the things we can do with technology that we could not have done 5 years ago even. With regard, if I could, what Dr. Price says about the international, we now are tied to we're projecting Kenya. Believe it or not, New Community, which is totally urban, has got a demonstration farm 100 miles from Nairobi. The local university now we email with. 1 year ago we couldn't. And that becomes our communication point for this particular village where we have our demonstration farm. So I think it's going to open up a whole world to people of the possibilities. They'll be able to communicate. Our children in our school at St. Rose communicate with people from the Czech Republic and Slovakia, 2 schools. That wasn't available before. So it's a great chance for us to level the field, as it were, the playing field, with technology.
What are the top 3 foundation steps that have to be taken to get Newark to where it needs to be in the future? I'll start with Dr. Price.
I would say education, education, education.
Mr. Caldwell, how do we get Newark where it needs to be?
I would say, again, education, I agree. I mean, education is the root, the foundation of all of that. But again, that strategic development, not only in the central business district, but strategic development throughout the city. I mean, you're looking at, and I keep mentioning Clinton Hill, but I think that area may be the next development area. Once downtown, people are focusing in downtown, that there are other parts of the city, and I agree with Monsignor Linder that there are other part of the Central Ward is ripe for a lot of opportunity to make it a very, very livable place. I think, and we've not talked a lot about healthcare, but I think healthcare is a critical piece of making the city vibrant and to achieve our goals 10 years from now. So that's.
Monsignor Linder, what foundations should Newark be building now for the future?
I agree with Dr. Price with regard to education. The only thing I'd add to it is I think we have to begin to do more in the way of lifetime user-friendly education. We have a lot of people who are in entry-level jobs, and we need now to create a culture here in our city where people continue their education and move up. You can in a very short period of time, you can become a home health care provider, but we have a shortage of nurses. Most critical, and our state is the most critical. It's the most critical issue in the United States. Is right here in our own state. So why can't we work with a work-study program that allows those who have become home health care providers to become licensed practical nurses and eventually get a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing? We need to start thinking that way, and in the end, we'll be the beneficiaries of that because we won't be so short in some of the skills we so desperately need.
How can this exchange influence other cities to spark urban economic development? What lessons have been learned within Newark that can be applied to other urban areas? Dr. Price, let's start this question with you.
Well, I think the technology has been referenced before, and Newark's narrative is far more accessible now because of the Internet, because of websites, because I think the local and regional press is a lot more sophisticated with respect to urban living than it used to be. And having said that, let me also say that the eyes of the world, so to speak, are really on Newark. I don't know of an American city that was as demonized as was Newark the 30 years after 67. Every man at this table has probably been out of Newark, where when you say you're from Newark, people used to grimace. They don't grimace anymore in my travels. They're interested in NJPAC. They're interested in what Monsignor Linder continues to do. It's the most amazing thing to now say that you're from Newark, and you have a lot to say. Not to be overly romantic, I'm not. But recently I was in some city, and we were talking about the arts. And I said, well, if there's any city that has figured out how to give the arts a social agenda, it's Newark. I mean, NJPAC, if I were forced to defend NJPAC, notwithstanding some of the very, very thoughtful things that Monsignor Linder has said about that kind of investment over the years, I would say that it helped the city to regain a sense that its streets belong to everybody. So what NJPAC does on Thursday night may be under the banner of vodka, but what it manages to do to streets that people stayed away from, I think really, really matters to the perception of downtown Newark and its neighborhoods. I've noticed something very, very interesting in my travels throughout Newark. There are just more people on the streets now. Maybe it's because the streets are cleaner. Maybe it's because we are beyond the crack cocaine wars of the 1980s and 90s. Maybe it's because we have a police force that seems to be doing a better job than a previous generation of cops here in Newark. But all of that good story, I think, is getting out now because of the things that I mentioned earlier.
Monsignor Linder, how can efforts used here help other cities?
Yeah, I think there's a great deal of interest on the community development side. That I can tell you. Last year and the year before, we had over 20 different countries represented in visits to New Community, and some for extended time, as much as 2 weeks. Actually, from Kenya, we had people for a month, actually, from their social work department, the university, to come and learn about community development. So there's a great deal of interest, I think. Some of it might surprise people. For example, we've now dealt with about 20 groups from Northern Ireland, non-government groups that we've been working with to try to have them involved in neighborhood economics as part of the peace movement. So that's increasing. And I think technology is going to allow us to really kind of increase the pace of that, sharing information, ongoing. This is really an opportunity. But I think people around the world are interested in success stories, and they want to learn. And, I mean, we've had them from Central and Eastern Europe. And we have 2 federal agencies now use us regularly for training with the people they're dealing with in various countries. So I think it is. It's going to be an exciting time in Newark.
Mr. Caldwell, how can this exchange influence others?
I think there's a pretty clear work plan as to what's happened here. And the prescription, if you look at other cities, and we're thinking of New Brunswick or some others, it's worked. It seems to work this way. There's a public-private civic partnership that brings a major arts organization or several major arts organizations together. That brings stronger private focus because people are coming who wouldn't otherwise come. People who have resources are coming. That private focus focuses a lot on downtown, making downtown a strong area, and the neighborhoods, and then the neighborhoods become part of that. And there's a realization that the neighborhoods, for a city to be strong, the neighborhoods have to be strong with downtown. And I think if you look at, and I use New Brunswick because I know it well, that's kind of what happened in New Brunswick. Still, they're working on the neighborhoods. It's not perfect there. But I think that there's a clear pattern. We've studied at the Alliance, Cleveland and Pittsburgh and some of the other and Rochester, New York, and you look at this kind of work plan seems to work. And it may not be intuitively there because you may not be able to measure exactly, well, why is this arts institution important? But it's critical to getting people to a city that wouldn't come otherwise with resources.
This concludes the audio program, Rebuilding America's Cities, Newark Renaissance.